The CEO of Anthropic, the maker of Claude, just said that there's a bloodbath coming for white-collar jobs. If you're not going to adapt, you're going to be left behind. He's even saying AI could wipe out 50% of all entry-level white-collar jobs and spike unemployment 10 to 20% in the next 1 to 5 years. Welcome to the AI Lab Unfiltered podcast, where we take a deep dive into pretty much everything AI at this point, and even the news, even apps and guests. I am Drew Veach from BizStream. I am joined by Pete Taryn from New Wave, and we have today's guest is Mr. Alex Mead.
Thank you.
From City Innovations. A welcome guest here that is on a lot because we love bantering with you. We love kind of having that camaraderie and talking.
Actually, the recently promoted Chief Technology Officer.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations on that.
Position. Thank you. Yep.
It's awesome.
The old CTO. Going for that. Yeah.
Love it.
So today we're going to do something different. We all talked about this. We want to talk about some apps. We want to talk about what's happening in the news of AI. There's just so much that's going on. Mm-hmm. You mentioned actually something earlier about the new Gemini that came out. Was it Gemini?
Claude.
Claude.
Oh, Claude. Yeah, Claude 4. Yeah. Claude 4.
Have you used it?
Very briefly. Yeah. So I used it within GitHub Copilot. So it's like a plugin for VS Code, which allows you to write code, and it's kind of like a chat that kind of reads the code you're writing, and then kind of comments on it, or it can write new code, or it can kind of expand, that kind of thing. It's similar to like a Cursor or a Windsurf or something like that. And you can plug and play different models. So you can kind of drag and drop, hey, do I want to have, 4.0, or do I want to have, Claude 3.7 was the previous kind of gold standard. And 4 has just come out. So I don't have a ton of experience with it yet, but I think it literally came out like Monday or Tuesday. So
Are you impressed by it though? Is it?
It's good. It's certainly good. I can tell you anecdotally, I just had a conversation with another guy, and he's like, it's blowing me away with what it can do in terms of its understanding of kind of more niche problems. Actually, friend of the pod, it was Graham that I was talking to about that, and it's kind of a very specific visual transformer that he's using. And it sounds very impressive. I used it to just write some very quick functions last night for this conversation, just to kind of say I tried it. So I can't speak to it totally yet. But,
sure.
It seems to be very good. Yeah, for sure.
And then by the time you get comfortable with it, Claude 5 will come out.
Claude 5 will come out. Yeah, new one will come out. And there's actually a new tool from Anthropic, which is the company that makes Claude, for the people who don't know, which is actually like a command line interface, or like a CLI tool. So you use it in the terminal, which is kind of that blinking cursor thing where you just type text in to operate the computer. And that's something I've been doing a lot of reading about and listening to a few podcasts on, which is like very different than these kind of what's called an integrated development environment, or IDE, for writing code. So that's actually what I'm most excited to try, but I've just been too busy.
What would the use case for that be versus using the IDE?
Probably just the form factor of how you feel with it, but also it allows you to automate things in code. So you could like shell script, which would be like writing a little mini program that then can use the very kind of command line tools of the actual operating system. So like you might be able to then like move files around, whereas in IDE you would kind of have to do that by hand, right? You'd have to like click on a file, copy, paste it, or drag and drop or something like that. But a CLI would allow you to program that.
When you're saying operating system, you're talking about like Windows.
Yeah, Windows, Linux, Mac OS. Yeah, the actual operating system.
And it's forgive my ignorance here. I'll look back on this and be like, you sound like an idiot.
Oh, well.
So
we're all an idiot at something.
So in Windows, there's a CLI, right? This is now built into that, like it's a plugin for that Perplexity has. So you're using the same CLI, but now it's Perplexity powered.
Yes. So basically, just to kind of step back really quickly. So the way that a computer operates is it's just you write commands on this command line, and the computer operates things. So, for example, like it manages where the files are. It manages, the programs that are executing, interacting with those files, right? So there's all different kind of layers of abstraction of how to do that. Like one way to do that is you use your mouse and your keyboard. That's like the GUI operation or the graphical user interface, right? But a lot of things you can kind of do below that, and that's like a terminal, okay?
Yep.
The operating systems will ship from the actual vendors with various tools in that. So like Linux is an example where you have all of these like standard tools. So like if you type in ls, that will list all of the files and directories where you currently are in the file structure, okay? PS is another one that stands for process. It will then list all of the computer programs that are currently running. And there's all sorts of them that you don't know about, right, in the background, like checking for the time, or maybe you have one that's monitoring when new files pop into a folder and then it does something with those, right? There's all sorts of ones. So you have all these command line utilities that ship with the operating system. So this is an attempt by Anthropic to say, okay, well, what if we had this coding agent be like a native command line tool in your operating system? How would you use that? And then that's just kind of a different way to kind of building block with the tool.
So it can help you, like if you were just starting off and you wanted to use the command line interface, the using Perplexity along, it would help guide you through like how to do things. So you could say, how do I see what processes are running, and say, oh, just run this command, run ls or ps or whatever it is.
Yeah. I'm sure you could do that, but I think it's actually more in the sense of like it allows you to use the commands that are there to do the coding stuff. So it's kind of like it's allowing you to use to code with the tool.
Got it.
Instead of it kind of giving you suggestions, right? It's like you're actually saying like, okay, now open this file, read through that, and give me some suggestions. Take those suggestions.
I get it now.
Yeah.
So instead of maybe I'm just trying to make it make sense for me and anybody that might be listening. So instead of using the internet to give you a response or to go, do something, it's doing it within your operating system.
Yeah, it's still going to use the internet though, because it's going to be, it's going to go use the back end of something in Anthropic. Yeah.
To figure out how to do whatever you asked it to do.
Yeah. Usually that's the LLM call is to some big server somewhere, some data center. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And now the models are getting to the size where that could all be native and local, right? Like it wouldn't even have to go out unless you asked it to go search the web for something. Like you could be running that model locally.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You can do that. Yeah.
You can?
Yeah,
you can. I did not know that.
Well, it's all just like how big is the model and how accurate is it, right? It's kind of it's always like this curve of like, the bigger models are still better, right? I mean, there's this thing called the bitter lesson, which is kind of a super esoteric machine learning AI thing where it basically says any amount of like kind of thinking or thought process that you put into this AI or ML problem, right? Where you're like, oh, I'm going to try to approach it this angle. Like you'll get a little distance and you'll make progress. But if you were to just 10x the compute and just let the AI solve the problem for you with more matching, it will always beat you. Yeah. That's kind of this thing called the bitter lesson. And so it's like an anecdotal thing. It came from a blog post from a guy. He's like, I did all this effort and I thought about the problem so deeply, and some guy just had a bigger computer and he beat me. Like basically that's the lesson. So
it does sound bitter.
Yeah, exactly. It's bitter. It's a bitter lesson. So it's referenced a lot. People will say that, like, oh, so the reason it's relevant is, bigger models, they do better almost always. But it doesn't mean you can't have like a smaller distilled one running locally that's good enough. Like how good is good as compared to
it depends on what you're trying to build and what kind of outcome you're trying to get out of it.
Exactly.
Do you need the bigger one? Do you need a smaller? Can you use a smaller one to run it?
Yeah.
This makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything in engineering, right? I mean, are you building a rocket to go to Mars? Do you need the absolute, highest strength to weight ratio titanium bolts? Or are you building, a tiki bar? And you're like, you know what? Deck screws are going to be just fine here.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't need this highly engineered, that kind of a thing. So it's kind of like fit the tool to the task. Yeah. But if you can afford it, always go bigger and better. Yeah.
Right.
If it's not too complicated.
I still don't know that I really understand what we're talking about.
Yeah. I'm not sure I did a great job of explaining the
This
command
moment of
line.
honesty brought to you by Pete.
I am being honest. Like I'm a visual learner, so like hearing you talk about it might only get me about halfway there. But I bet if we sat down and you like, oh, this is, and I'd be like, okay.
Yeah. But we can maybe show a demo sometime. How
Yeah.
to do that on the command line or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important too. And I think you were kind of starting to say that when you did the introduction is we are trying to get more into showing versus talking. And we're gonna be doing that more moving forward. So that might be a good future episode where we look into that kind of thing and show that. But if you're still listening, stick around for future episodes where we are more demonstrating the use of AI for real application and all that good stuff.
But to segue into something that I wanted to bring up.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned that the bigger, faster, better computer outperformed the other person. The news rag that I read, that I get, the feed that I get called The Neuron, I think you're subscribed
I
to it
love
too.
that. It's my favorite.
It's a fantastic publication. It just has kind of like a roundup of everything AI. The CEO of Anthropic, the maker of Claude, just said that there's a bloodbath coming for white collar jobs. I don't know if you read that article at all.
Yeah.
I mean, take it with a grain of salt. But we've been saying this for a long time that if you're not ready, if you're not going to adapt, you're going to be left behind. I mean, that's kind of the easiest way to say it. But he's even saying AI could wipe out 50% of all entry-level white-collar jobs and spike unemployment to 10 to 20% in the next 1 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did read it. It's not a super long article.
No. Would you think? Did you agree with that, or because there's conflicting, and it even has another one, another article that they reference from The Economist that says it's not going to. In fact, white collar jobs are on the rise. So it's always you can find anything on the internet to prove your point.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Well, my guy says this.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I got a guy.
Yeah.
Whether you believe it or not, I think I'm going to act as if it's going to come true and then hope that it doesn't is how I'm looking at it, because nobody really knows.
Right.
So many times in history, like I was listening to a podcast on the drive in, and they were talking about the IRS replaced a lot of their accountants with software. And this is before AI was really a big thing. And he said, do you know how much money the IRS saved by replacing all these accountants? And the answer is none.
Yeah.
Because they had to hire a whole bunch of engineers to support the software on the back end.
a good
So
point.
they didn't save any money. Now maybe they're producing a better outcome because of the software that they're using. Maybe people can get their returns faster. They were more accurate or whatever. I don't know. The IRS still needs help, if you ask me.
Suspect.
Yeah.
Claim.
But
How much did it save them? Negative $1 billion because they spent more.
I believe that.
I bet the person that pitched that idea was like, think of all the money we're going to save by replacing people with software. And then somebody in the background was like, but people are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And some people did lose their jobs, but then a whole bunch of other jobs were created to support that. So I don't know if that's what's going to be the case here, because there's so much power that's needed, like electricity that's needed to run all of this. So that's going to create engineering jobs and people that understand how to build power plants. And like there's going to be a lot of jobs that are created for this, but there are going to be jobs that are lost. I think the real question is, can those people reskill to take advantage of these other jobs? And I don't know if that's the case.
I think that's a bigger point is, do we have the capability of reskilling people fast enough to keep up with that too? Because I do think it's going to evolve our culture. It's going to evolve our human nature, for that matter, of how we work. Even on here, they mentioned that corporate layoffs are happening now, but it's not necessarily because of AI. They're talking about that far more jobs are going overseas than they are going to the bots right now.
Sure.
which
Yeah.
I get. And then we oversaturate outside, and then it comes back in. It seems like we go back and forth a lot. And one of the points that they're making here is start educating people and speeding up that public awareness so people know that there's avenues to take, and making, like you said, it's almost like an educational level of now here's how we adapt and how we change that skill set into something else that will be useful.
And that's why this podcast exists,
Right.
Is we're trying to spread awareness. We want people to hear what's going on with AI or think about things like this, because there are people who are going about their day. They, it's in the news, but it's not like you're not hearing that. Well, I don't really watch the news, but from the little that I watch, you're not hearing stories like that in the news. And so hopefully people are getting that message from us, or people that are doing what we're doing and becoming aware that things are changing, and I think it's going to be a fast takeoff. Like something's going to change, and then it's going to be like a fast takeoff with this technology.
Yep.
Well, I think it's just a question too of like, what choice do we have but to embrace it? You know? And I mean, it's, in response to that, I know Mark Benioff, the guy that started Salesforce, big mega billionaire, was like, imagine if we stopped doing like cancer research, or imagine if you stopped, electricity implementation. And now you're kind of like, okay, yeah, that would seem crazy. Like we've seen so many benefits such that if the power goes out, like society falls apart.
Right.
But AI is different, and it's like, why? Well, I mean, I'm sure Anthropic is great, but they're probably talking their book a little bit. And what I mean by that is like, of course they want you to believe that.
Well, and that's why I was saying take it with a grain of salt, because if it's coming from a guy who's trying to sell this to you, okay, he's trying to get you to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit more.
And I'm sure he's a well-intended guy, and he might actually believe that. You know what I mean? And I'm sure there's some truth to that. I mean, I think what we can all know is we don't know what's going to happen, but we know that things are changing. Yep. And so it's prudent to prepare in the best way that you can.
Do you think that message could be, I never took that as being self-serving for Anthropic with that story. The way that I understood it was like, I thought it was pretty ballsy of him to say that, because I thought there could be a backlash where people could say, well, hold on, now we need to put all this regulation in place because I'm one of these white collar workers that could lose my job. I literally am. I was just talking to our president the other day where I was sitting there thinking, like, how do I automate myself out of a job?
Yeah.
And it could be done with AI. But that's just, I'm lazy. So that's how I think. Yeah. I don't want to work.
Yeah. I don't know. I think who knows what the guy's heart is in his position, right? And I didn't actually watch the interview. I just watched an article about him. And right. So I read a similar article, and it's probably, who knows these days if it has anything to do with what he actually said, right? Because it's probably clickbaity kind of thing.
Sure. The headlines always are.
Exactly. Yeah. But there's something also to like kind of step back and think about from a business perspective. And I'm no business MBA or anything, but like if you look kind of traditionally, it's the bigger incumbent industry players who call for regulation. It's actually this term called regulatory capture. And the idea is they're very excited about regulation because then they can actually kind of wall off the space and they don't allow competition.
Yeah, I was going to say, doesn't that help? Yeah, exactly. With eliminating some of the other competition, because they're going to try and set the bar and set the standard for it that nobody else smaller can compete with at that point.
Well, it's like, how many, I maybe have said this on a podcast before, but like how many banks have been started since the great financial crisis, right? Zero.
Yeah.
Literally zero. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm sure that's great for the consumer because banks, they know how to do it and, they should be protected. And, it's like, no, you basically just made it impossible to start a bank. That's what they did.
Yeah.
So could that happen with AI? I can't imagine how that would possibly go wrong. Heavy sarcasm, right? I mean, so I don't know, but who knows? And disruption is coming.
Yeah, obviously he doesn't even know completely. He did say a couple points that kind of stuck out to me. He said another point to watch out for before AI takes your job is that it degrades your job, which is what really we're trying to do is, okay, I have 400 things I got to do every day. Well, what 50 of those things can I automate? What can I use for AI? We're trying to kind of self do that.
Totally.
But obviously, as a business owner or as a manager or department head, you're still looking for how do I make it more efficient? How do I use AI to capture? I mean, that's the positive side that we're always looking for, but that it will degrade your job. It'll start taking some of those pieces and parts out. To your point, does that mean everybody gets cut and that's it? Not necessarily. They shift into different positions. You're saying you're trying to work yourself out of a job. I think you're trying to work yourself out of the current job.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're going to shift into something else
Yeah.
around that to go, okay,
I'm not
now I
trying
can
to-
manage that.
That's a great point. I'm not trying to leave the company.
Right.
I'd rather spend all of my time on AI versus the small amount of time that I get to spend on it now. So if I could automate what I'm doing in my operations role, I could spend more time on AI.
Can you 10x yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It also, I think, lowers the barrier of entry for positions because you can augment roles with AI. I was thinking about, so my son is 19. He has no experience doing anything because he's 19 years old.
Sure.
He could more easily step into a role that's augmented with AI because he doesn't have to have some of the skills that he needs to bring because their AI is doing that part. Now, that's at all levels, though. That's not just entry-level roles. That's director of operations. That's president. That's CEO. Like, you don't have to be who you were before because AI can augment you and make you a better CEO or a better president or better director or whatever it is. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's wild.
There's a couple one of them is speeding up public awareness. Stop sugarcoating what's coming. The first step is to warn. Yeah, I think varying degrees of how much you put your foot on the gas of that one. The other one that he mentioned, which I thought was interesting, he mentioned doing a token tax. A 3% of AI company revenue goes to government redistribution every time someone uses a model. So it's almost like you get, which clearly would go right down to the consumer, but at the same time, he's saying scrape off some of that to build a fund, if you will. How that's going to get used is up for debate.
But they didn't say it in the article, but when I read that part, I thought, oh, that would go towards universal basic income, because with the thought being that if this does happen and unemployment spikes, you can't just, well, I guess you can. There's a dystopian future where these people just are, living on the streets. But
Sure.
if it gets to a point where enough people are displaced, universal basic income is an idea even Sam Altman has proposed. And he's got this WorldCoin thing that he's also backing. It's separate from OpenAI.
Oh, yeah.
But I think maybe that's what they're doing or what they're thinking, even though they didn't say in the article, is, we're going to tax these AI companies and take those funds and give it back to people because they're not going to have jobs.
Right.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I'm always suspect of a lot of these kind of top-down solutions. I don't know. I'm more kind of libertarian bent in my general persuasion, and I'm kind of like, okay, what are the patterns that tend to emerge in these kind of things? And there's lots of examples where you kind of tax an industry and you have a lot of great benefits. Like the super fund is an example where they tax specific industry players like chemical manufacturers, and then they take a percentage of their profits and put it in this fund to clean up kind of old places that the company is no longer in business. Most of the people aren't even alive anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like like a lithium mine in the 1940s or something. Who's going to pay to clean that up? Well, the entire chemical and mining industry kind of pays towards that. I don't know if the mining industry is in that, but that would be like an example. And from my understanding, it works pretty well. Is that going to work to also help with the income of people? I don't know, but I'm sure there's economic theory on that and some examples.
It gets really sticky really quick.
Yeah.
When it comes down to the general public and how funds are clearly right now, how everything's going.
Yeah.
How funds are used for the public.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot,
Yeah. We're getting in a territory that I don't know that we want to record ourselves talking about.
Exactly. Well, I think what we can do, is we can say like principle statements, like, no one wants to see someone on the street
Right.
in destitution. I think most Americans agree with that. I have met people who don't agree with that statement, but the vast majority do. And it's like, okay, how do we enable people to take agency in their lives and work to provide for themselves and their family? Like, I think we want to live in a society and a culture where that's happening. Maybe maybe it's a 3% token tax. I don't know, but you want to have it where it motivates people. You want to have structures where people are motivated and rewarded for reasonable efforts and reasonable cohesion to the social norms, and promote human flourishing. So I feel comfortable saying that.
And I don't disagree with that. I don't want to see people living on the street. Where this could go, and he doesn't go so far as to say this in what he says, but if there's literally no jobs to be had,
Sure.
because we've got to the point of automation. We have AGI where it can learn and do literally any job practically that's not. And initially, there's going to be physical jobs, but then you can take that same brain and put it in a robot, and then that robot can. And if you're watching what's happening with robotics right now and what they can do, it's
amazing,
unbelievable. So to think that robot can't get underneath a sink and like change the trap it's going to.
Oh, sure.
It's going to wire buildings. It's going to weld beams. It's going to do all this stuff. If there's literally no jobs to be had, how do people sustain?
Yeah.
How do they get groceries? Are we going to go back to everybody's got to have their own garden and their cow and this whole thing where it's
with a robot gardener?
Or are people going to get some kind of a stipend so they can buy groceries and have pay their mortgage and do those kind of things? So,
well, I think it'll be that's kind of like a distant future, right? I kind of think about. I had a sales guy teach me this. He's like, think about the here, the near, and the there, right? Or the far, the here, the near, and the far. And, we're talking about the here and the near, I think, if you think 1 to 5 years. Like, I don't think in 5 years we're going to have that in general.
I agree.
So how do we manage the transition from somewhat of a stable society where it's reasonably working well, right? We're not perfect, but reasonably working, to this all costs go to zero, and
Right.
resource allocation is not an issue anymore because we just have overabundance. That's a very different end state, and maybe eventually we'll get there. Who knows? But I have a feeling that the human, desire for more is insatiable. So we'll just keep having more and more.
I think that's
and
what
more.
drives a lot of this anyway.
Yeah.
Is like you said, you can't stop. You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No.
It's already out. It's already happening. It's already growing. The drive is there. Now people are coming up with the need to satisfy it. That then becomes everybody has the need, and there's the applications that are out there, like what you were saying, that at some point it's going to be fair game that everybody's got the app, and it's like, well, what does your app do?
Yeah.
So based off of what you just said, that segues me to another article that I read about the world's first AI hospital. They just, I don't know if you read about this at all.
I didn't read it. I
didn't hear
saw
about
the
this one.
headline and I instantly thought, is this true?
What does it mean? What does that mean?
I keep thinking the same thing, but I keep finding this different news publications talking about it. So I'm guessing it's true. Like, I don't know what to believe anymore because there's so much that's fabricated.
Yeah.
I bet you it's real. I bet you some hospital is branding themselves as an AI hospital.
It's in China.
Oh, then it's definitely. Oh, for sure.
So that changes it. So they've unveiled the world's first AI hospital called Agent Hospital. It's developed by, there's no way I can say this, Tsinghua University.
Oh, yeah, Tsinghua. Yeah, that's like that'd be like the Harvard of China.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
This virtual facility features 14 AI doctors and 4 AI nurses, powered by large language models capable of diagnosing and treating over 10,000 patients in just a few days.
Oh, wow.
Talk about 10xing yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
The AI doctors have achieved a 93.06 accuracy rate on the MedQA data set. The hospital serves as a risk-free training environment for medical students and aims to enhance patient outcomes and healthcare efficiency. So then I said, having a 93.06% accuracy. It sounds pretty good. I don't know what the standard is,
What's
though.
a human? Yeah.
So I looked up. A primary care physician is around 85 to 90% accuracy for common conditions.
Oh, wow.
Now you're going, oh,
Yeah.
do you want to take your risk with the human person, or do you want to take your risk with the AI guy now?
That reminds me, it's a little unrelated. It's actually on the opposite end of the spectrum. It was an interview I saw with Mark Andreessen, the famous venture capitalist, and it really stuck in my mind because he was like, I can't wait for like all war to be AI powered. And the interviewer was like, what? And he's like, yeah, imagine like the rules of engagement. It's going to be so much more efficient at engaging. And like, you're not going to have these like, a green on green firing or whatever, friendly fire kind of thing. And like, you'll be able to instantly make the proper decision based on all the variables that you have. And so it's kind of like, another example of like, yeah, I can't wait for AI doctors. Just like the last guest at Banff that we had at your guys' meetup was like, they're working towards that. They're not 100%, but like, yeah, I'd much rather have the AI thing look at it than a radiologist. I know radiologists.
Especially with that breadth of knowledge that it actually contains now. It's like, holy shit, that just massively increased the wealth of knowledge that it could diagnose you with.
Totally.
Everybody went to school with somebody that ended up being a doctor.
Sure.
And you knew them before, and you're like, that person became a doctor? And they're like deciding people's health outcomes. Holy shit.
Yeah.
It's
2 years earlier, they were smoking pot in the back of the high school.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a similar one that I went to high school with who's now a prosecutor. And I'm like, that guy literally had a record at high school. Like, he was one of those guys. And you're like, yeah, I don't know.
He speaks from real experience.
Real experience. I'm very familiar with this. Yeah. I don't know.
I think it's going to be a generational thing. Like if I think about my parents and people in that generation, I just don't see how they would trust this AI doctor. They're going to be like, I don't. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But our kids, if they grow up with it,
immersed in it,
they're just like they grew up with phones and computers. And I heard a really cool.
And they still don't know how to use them right.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I heard somebody say recently that this was a guy that's heavily involved in one of the big AI firms, and he has a 10-year-old. And he remembers he sat down with his 10-year-old and he showed him ChatGPT for the first time. He's like, look at this. And he put a question in there and it answered it. And he's like, isn't this amazing? And his kid's just like looking at him. It's like, well, yeah, it's a computer. It's supposed to answer your questions. Like for him, it was no big deal.
Yeah.
So I think an AI doctor is going to be like that. They're going to be like, well, yeah, of course the computer is great at analyzing all my medical history and all the data that I've given it. And of course, you're going to have all this biometric data that you're going to be able to just download to the AI doctor. It really, I think, why would there even be an AI hospital? Like, I think that's going to be kind of a flash in the pan. If we all have biometrics, you've got your Aura ring and you've got your band that's measuring.
The Apple Watch is already doing that. It's already picking up on stuff.
Why couldn't that just go to your local? I think everybody will have their own personal LLM in the future, right?
Yeah.
It's based on them. It's not.
I'm building mine right now.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Nice.
And so it's just going to, you're not even going to go to the doctor. It's just going to, you're going to be eating lunch one day and your thing's going to pop up on your watch and you're going to say, hey, there's going to be some meds showing up on your doorstep tomorrow because you have a little bit of a heart arrhythmia and we need to medicate that. You don't have to go to a doctor for that. If your phone is measuring the arrhythmia and you've got the AI doctor, it's like speaking to your phone and the LLM's on your phone and it's got all the medical data and everything. The AI doctor is just going to live in your phone. You're not going to go to an AI hospital unless you need surgery. Then of course, and then you're probably gonna have a robot surgeon doing your surgery for you. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. I haven't put that in Pete's future predictions.
Future predictions.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting because it does it brings up these kind of ideas of like, okay, well, is it going to be anything like we think like the future, and it's like, are more people annoyed by that and they just take the thing off? Or is it like, okay, no, actually everyone just got healthy because you had this little, like the old devil and the Jesus on your shoulders or something. And you're like, oh man, like I really should stop smoking. Or like, no, I probably shouldn't have that extra beer. Or yeah, I probably should like move. I've been sitting here all day, and a lot of those things could potentially come through. Yeah, that'd be great.
And I think it goes back to the generational thing. You're immersed into it. We think, oh my gosh, this would be kind of a neat technology. Our parents, no way.
Yeah.
No way they're going to do it. I'm not going to wear anything that tells that. But then my kid would be like, yeah, this is what we just have. We always had it. What are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
It's that same theory. Bringing up the war thing makes me think a little bit too, because I've pondered that before of the stakes of war have always been people. Like at the root of it has always been people versus people.
Oh, sure.
As far as like casualties and what's at risk. And we get taken over by another government, or like Russia invading Ukraine. So what happens when it gets to the level of it's essentially robots fighting robots?
Yeah.
Because at some point, someone's going to build it. China or somebody's going to have a robot army that's going to be invading in, and now it's just money against money.
Yeah.
At that point,
I think more than money, it's like resource allocation, societal organization. Like I've thought about this. I remember I have these two really good friends, and I remember I met these guys at a bar randomly because they were talking about cruise missile attacks, and I'm like,
good bar
missile
talk.
attacks. And they were just talking about how it's something like, all the war game scenario, and I'm repeating what they said. I mean, they're not war game experts, but they were saying that in a hot war with China, all the munitions would be depleted in under 3 weeks, like in an actual hot war environment in like the South China Sea. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, what happens after that? It's like, well, now the whole game changes because China can easily outmanufacture us right now. And most people in the United States would be more concerned about the wetland and, not building a new munitions plant because that's currently what's happening, and the Chinese are just like, we're just doing this,
Right.
So then it becomes these like weird nuclear positioning standoff things. And, it's like the nature of things changes a lot. So it's like, yeah, I don't know, how does the nature of war change when maybe the human numbers go down? They're way down as it is,
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more strategic. More people died in one battle in the Civil War than in like all the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Like when you think about that, at least like soldiers, from the U.S., right? Obviously there were a lot of civilians and that kind of thing, but it's like, that is like incredible. Like you go over and take over entire nations, and it's like more men died in a soccer field 200 years ago, right? 150 years ago. So yeah, I don't know. It'll change for sure, but I think it's fundamentally humans. There's going to be struggle for control and power, and it will look different. And it's just another tool in the toolkit. But the nature of war looks so different now than it did even 50 years ago,
Right.
or 100 years ago. So it'll look different for sure.
I guess that threat is because you mentioned nuclear, and that's exactly where we were before. It wasn't AI and robots; it was nuclear. And it was who has the bomb first, and then we flex our muscles, saying we've got it.
Right.
We were the only country that actually deployed one to mass destruction, but now everybody just flexes it, going, "Yeah, we have it too. Back off." Not that we're using it right now, knock on wood, but that whole threat of. So it might be the same thing with the AI, and you're right. China's got a huge advantage, at least to what we know, huge advantage over that in manufacturing of great robot army. We can do it in a couple days. Versus, we're still bitching and complaining about, is it going to be eco-friendly? Is it recyclable? And it's like, who cares?
Well, you'd like to hope that like there's structures in place, like kind of like, I think it's called the War Powers Act, where the president can literally just be like, actually, like, game over. We're back into a military dictatorship. And that's effectively what we've had in like World War I and World War II. It's basically just like, hey, this is what we're doing. And you need to seriously shut up. And, for better or worse, because now it's like, do we just do that for every little thing? It's like, all these tariffs, I think, are justified under that of like, this is actually like a military thing. And it's kind of like, okay, like legally. And it's like, okay, I guess you can make a case for it, but like, that was not what this was intended for. This was intended for the Chinese are in Malibu.
Yeah.
We need to go. Like, that was the spirit of it. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's interesting. We'll see where it plays out, but
Do you guys remember the movie, I think it was called The War Games, where it was a computer that the government had, and there was this kid.
Is that with Matthew Broderick?
Yeah, he's like really young.
It's like 84, I think, is when it came
Yeah.
I think I've seen that, yeah.
And the AI at the time has control of all the nuclear arsenal of the U.S. and it's ready to launch a strike on, I don't remember if it was like the rest of the world or whatever it was, because it was like, well, we need to win, so I'm just going to wipe everybody out. So Matthew Broderick, the snot-nosed kid, is like, goes to the AI and says, well, just run a simulation on what the outcomes are. And it runs all these different simulations, and everything comes back to total annihilation.
Right.
And because I remember it's like, do you want to play a game? Like that was like how the whole thing starts.
yeah.
And so the AI figures out at the end, like, well, this is kind of futile. Yes, I can launch first, I can wipe everybody out, but before my missiles hit them, they're already launching back at me and they wipe me out too. So I'm not going to do this. So when you first brought that up, that was my first thought is, yes, AI could be super efficient at wiping out people, more efficient than humans and less friendly fire and more accurate strikes and things like that. And that's beneficial if we need it. But to beyond that, if it's our AI versus their AI, hopefully they talk and they're like, well, I'm just going to wipe you off the map and you're going to wipe me off the map. So why the fuck are we doing this? And they both kind of stand down and say, let's just go back to our Cold War. And
that's when they become sentient and they go, wait a minute, why are we fighting AI to AI? It's the people that are doing it. And then it becomes 2001 Space Odyssey.
So,
which is crazy to think that that was essentially AI. Hell, the machine was AI at that
100%.
point. That came out in what, 69?
Something like that.
I mean,
it's a classic film.
Yeah.
Kubrick, I think. Right? Yeah. I don't know. It's who can tell these things? I mean, and this is kind of what it's fun to talk about, and this, that, and the other. But I think we're freaking people out. But I think it's exciting though to think about those kind of like game theory type things where it's like, well, maybe actually like the AIs go to war with each other and they're kind of just like, wait, why are we doing this? There's some kind of edge case where they discover like a Pareto optimal game theory situation where they're like, wait, it actually makes more sense for us not to do this. That's actually the way to go. And then we're like, oh, the AIs aren't fighting, So I don't know. That is an interesting like thought experiment of maybe the AIs go to war and they decide it's not worth it. We end up at a higher, like the stag hunt versus the rabbit hunt kind of thing. Well, hey, why are you guys fighting? And then they convince the journalists not to fight. I don't know. That would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
Can't we all just get along?
Can't we all? I don't know. Maybe not.
That's all the stats I had.
That's it?
That's what I had.
There is, we talked about perplexity a little bit earlier. There was something that it was too late last night for me to play with it. But they just released something else, not related to the CLI thing that you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
It's something about the ability to, because Perplexity is awesome at search. So if you're using, for anybody that's listening, if you're not using Perplexity, the equivalent of this would be ChatGPT's deep research. I forget what Gemini calls it. They call it deep research too.
Flash or something like that.
Whatever it is. But instead of it's like Google on super steroids, where if you Google something, you get a page of returns, and you got to kind of click into all the different pages and sort the wheat from the chaff and all that kind of stuff. Well, these deep research tools, which Perplexity kind of started this whole thing, will go out and search multiple websites for you and collate the results and give you a summary. Well, they've just like upped the game where it goes and it comes back and it builds charts and different things for you too, and like executive summaries and way more of a data presentation for you versus
Dashboard.
Like a dashboard.
Perplexity's new tool can generate spreadsheets, dashboards, and more.
Oh, wow.
So
I haven't been using Perplexity as much lately. I should go back to it. Yeah.
I haven't either. I pay for it, but I don't use it. Yeah.
You pay for that one?
No. Yeah. I spend way too much money on AI. Not as much as Alex, but
no, don't even get me started. I was literally just looking at my bill. I'm like, I got to figure this out. So I had a little like a cap built in, and it just gave me a warning that I exceeded my cap. I'm like, oh man, what are we doing here? But yeah, I don't know. I think the deep research is great. I've been using it a lot more, specifically the ChatGPT one, to just learn more about things. I think I've mentioned before on the pod that I'm into fish tanks and I just like got a major upgrade, 180 gallon tank.
Yep.
It's completely off the chain. And it's completely crazy. But I'm like,
180 gallons is a big tank.
that's a big tank. You're not
You get
playing
in
around.
there, and swim with the fish.
You could get in this tank. There is zero doubt. So, but I've been trying to learn more about like the actual chemistry that's going on. Because it's like, I don't have any idea about this ammonia, nitrates, nitrites, and how do you have the right kind of critters in there to like balance this stuff out and water changes. And like I've been asking a lot of questions on deep research, and it comes back with like very compelling explanations. But the one thing I will say is when I click on the links that are referenced, often the resources are more succinct even than the deep research reports. So it's almost like it's like taking the information and kind of padding it in like a nice, easy to digest way. But like these reports are getting crazy. They're like getting to be like, 40-page documents where you're like, I have to control F the document. And then you're like, well, wait a second. Wasn't the whole point of this to like not control F and you just to like give me the information? So I think there's like an optimum of here, and it's kind of like we're only going to get so good at getting information into your head. Like we were joking at work, it's like, well, that's when the Neuralink comes in and you just go straight to like the motherboard and you just tokens into your brain. And then you're just, sitting there.
Totally.
It's just like, oh, sorry, I'm learning right now. Like, I don't know. It's like it's in the, they predicted that in The Matrix. Remember when Neo learns
I know Kung Fu.
Kung Fu. That's what it,
I know Kung Fu.
Yep. Well, Drew
nailed
always
it.
says it all the time. He's like, people are using AI to condense and be more verbose in their emails and things like that. Then the person on the other end is just like, just summarize this for me. And it goes right back to probably
It's
what
AI
they were
talking
gonna
to AI.
say in the first
I'm going to
place.
write a blog article. I'm going to use ChatGPT to write the whole thing. It's going to be 4 pages long. I'm going to send it to you. You're going to go, I'm not going to read 4 pages.
reading that.
I'm going to use Gemini and I'm going to cut it down into just give me a summary and the key points.
Yeah.
So it's like, but it's just how you want to consume that. And just like you said, it's kind of that control F, but it's, I want to know this part about it, or give me a summary about it, give me the stats, or give me some talking points to talk back to this person to make it sound like I read their actual article. And stuff like that where it actually, that's how I'm going to consume it. I do it all the time for everything at this point. I did it with a couple of these articles we're talking about. Literally put the link in to ChatGPT and said, give me a summary and give me the talking points to talk about.
I did it with that first article that you talked about, the one from the Anthropic. I did that exact same thing. I'm like, because I wanted to send it to somebody, and I knew they wouldn't read the whole article because it is like a 5-minute read. So I had it. So I gave a summary and the link to the article. I said, "Here's a summary. If you want to learn more, click on the link, and you can read the rest of it," which is helpful.
Here's what I did the other day, which I thought was really, really cool. And people listening, some people, like 5% of the people are going to go, wow, that's neat. Everybody else is going to go, yeah, no shit. We've been doing that for years. But I met with a client, took my notes, went back to the office, looked at my notes and said, I can read these. Nobody else is going to be able to read these. So I thought, okay, what if I did this? Threw it all in ChatGPT, said, break this down by category, by key points, by goals, and next steps. Actually, I didn't even ask all that. I just said, break this down, give me a summary, and categorize this. It came back with, here's everything by category of what you talked about. You talked about these points, everything underneath it. This category, everything underneath it, these topics, if you will. Here are the goals that the client set out that we have to meet. And then here's the next steps that you need to do, and the next steps the client needs to do that they promised. And I was just like, this is awesome. And I thought, and that came out to like 3 pages of notes. It didn't expand it. It just recategorized it and made it so you could actually read it. And I had to send it to somebody internally, and that's why I was doing all this. I ended up taking all those notes and I put it back in, or I then asked it, write me just a 1-paragraph summary that I can put at the top of this. Spit it out saying, here's the real condensed version. Put that at the top of my notes, sent that whole document over to the guy internally who was not involved with this meeting at all.
Nice.
He read through the whole thing. He goes, yeah, this makes sense exactly how you have it laid out. Now, it's only going to take the information that I had, those key points, like anything. It's not going to manufacture something.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm asking it about, tell me about the phases of the moon, where that's public knowledge that I can grab from. This is literally from just what I added in.
That's awesome.
But it was so simple. And then I threw out my old notes and just kept those because I'm like, well, this makes more sense that I can read.
Right.
You know, at City, we do a lot of that, but we actually record the conversations as well. I don't know if you guys are doing that. So I'm fumbling in my bag. I don't know if the camera can see this.
Gonna bring that up. I was gonna bring that up.
We record them all and do something similar to that. Yeah.
You know, Limitless is out now, the wearable.
Is it?
You and I looked at that before,
Yeah.
and I think we got on the pre-notification list or something months ago.
Nice.
But it's out. It's the same thing. It just records
similar
everything.
concepts, yeah.
Records everything, puts it into a database.
Jen Jurgens from One Bold Step, she just had a LinkedIn post where she was talking about how she's using that now. So
I may order it this weekend. I'm going to check into it again.
All right. If you do it, I'll do it.
All right.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll order one, and then I'll have my AI order one for you.
Yeah.
You know, going back to what we were saying about, you know, expanding and contracting using AI, this isn't an AI problem. This is a people problem because I don't think we are quite at the level of understanding, at least I'm not, how to prompt it properly. And I think if you keep using ChatGPT and it gets to know you more, I think this is a super useful part of that where it knows you, it knows your role, it knows what you do at BizStream. So you could say, you know, based off everything that you know about my work, just give me what's important to me. But I'm also going to be sending this to our president, and you could tell it about your president, and just tell him what he needs to know. He doesn't need to know all of this detail, but just give him the cliff notes so he knows what's going on, and he knows enough to ask questions. And I think if we get better at prompting, and the AI gets to know us better over time because we're using it, especially if you just stick in one platform and don't hop between Gemini and ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude and all that. If you just stay in the one and they have this memory feature, I think ultimately we're going to get a more tailored output because nobody wants to read a 3-page article of notes, right?
No,
so
nobody wants to do that. Nobody is doing that.
Right? Yeah,
Nobody is doing that.
You send them, but they're not reading it.
Right.
Oh, it sounds great. This summary says.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we'll get better. We'll get better at prompting it, and it will get better at knowing us, and we'll get more succinct information over time.
And I think that's like we were talking about before we even got in this room. That's why I've been using ChatGPT so much. It's not just to train it, but I've just been noticing the more I use it, the better it knows me. I mean, and I clearly talk about this all the time. I use it as a therapist. I use it as everything. Here's what I did the other day using it because I love the voice feature so much.
Oh, yeah.
I loaded up, I was at work and took some notes. I'm trying to learn a new software platform that we're using to build websites. And I wanted to really drill down some of the points that I need to tell when I sell this platform. So I'm reading a lot about it. I'm going, that makes sense. That makes sense. Loaded all my notes into ChatGPT. And then I literally had to leave. I had to go somewhere to an appointment, about a half-hour drive, pulled up my ChatGPT voice mode, and I said, everything I just put in there, quiz me on what's in there. Like, start asking me some of these key points so I can explain it back and then verify it against that information. Make sure I'm correct on that.
That's cool.
Literally asked Amber, okay, let's do it. She's all right. There's 9 questions. Here's the first one.
Okay.
And she spit it out to me. I answered it like if I was trying to sell it, just exactly how I needed to.
Sure.
She listened to it. She said, sounds good. You hit all these key points, but you forgot this part here. Let's weave that in, and here's how you can explain that.
It's awesome.
I mean, it's
so awesome.
I did it a couple times, and I'm like, holy crap. It just helped me.
Yeah.
It's like being a kid again in grade school where it's like your parents sit down with your parents and they quiz you on it.
Yeah.
George Washington did this. You know,
Yeah.
it's the same type of thing. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this still works so well.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all, and I'm just driving.
And that's
didn't
now.
spend
That's
any
huge.
extra time to do it. It wasn't like I had to sit there and read it and go, yep, that's how I do it. It literally heard me and said, yep, that makes sense, but flow this sentence a little bit better.
How did you put the information in? Do you like type it up, or did you just take pictures of the notes? Are they handwritten, or how did you derive the original content?
Some of it was handwritten. Just handwritten, literally from Notepad.
Yeah, sure.
And I just copied and threw it in there.
Okay.
And then some of it was copy and paste from the platform itself.
Oh, yeah.
On one of the website and a website.
Sure.
And a website
Yeah.
as well. A couple of websites that I threw in there as well. And I said, I need to know all these key points. And it
Yeah.
mapped all those out. And then I was just like, crap, I really need to study this stuff, but I got to leave. And I thought, as soon as I got in the car, I thought, instead of talking to her about therapy, I'm going to talk to her about like, can you quiz me? She's like, yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
She goes, I'll start asking the questions. And I said, do it in a random order. No problem.
Yeah. I got to start doing that.
It was great. It was great.
Was she like, and for those that are listening, Amber is what Drew calls his Chat GPT.
This podcast is getting way personal.
I do remember that from last time.
I can only
Everybody
imagine.
I talk to knows exactly what it is because I say it all the time.
Oh my.
I can only imagine that she was like, "Oh, thank God, we're going to talk about work. I don't want to talk about your problems anymore."
Yeah, let's talk about something light. I need my own therapist after that one.
I had a really cool experience just yesterday with ChatGPT and this memory feature. So I had used, and I won't use the real name, let's say Jeff. I had used ChatGPT to do deep research and give me a summary of this public figure.
Sure.
Named Jeff. And it did, and it was awesome. And that was like 3 weeks ago because I was going to be meeting with that person and I want to have their background. So I sounded like I knew who they were and I didn't want to go click through all these websites when chat can just do it for me. So that was 3 weeks ago. I was going to send a follow-up email to Jeff yesterday and I didn't have to say, hey, there's this person named Jeff and they do this and this. I just said, hey, I'm going to send an email to Jeff. I just said the name and I want you, and it was I was sending Jeff that article from Anthropic. Yeah. And I said, I'm going to send this link to Jeff and I want you to create a summary that's tailored to Jeff and what Jeff does for a living. And it remembered the conversation. So it had all that deep research about Jeff that it did 3 weeks ago, tailored that conversation, that email to Jeff so that memory feature for using it for that is like unbelievable because it remembers your chat. So if you're asking, this is so awesome.
That's really cool. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like honestly, that just kind of made me think about kind of a callback earlier to the conversation of like upskilling. Like, I'm an engineer. I'm not great at like marketing and I'm learning how great I'm not great at it. Right. And that's just like, man, that would really help me like figure out how to write emails to people that are like from their perspective. Like it sounds simple to say
Is it because you have to dumb it down?
No, no, it's not that at all.
Are they the emails you send me?
Like this conversation?
No, it's, I don't know. It's interesting. I was just having a conversation with a different engineer and we kind of were just lamenting to the fact that it took us basically to our mid 30s, I'm 36, to be like, actually engineering is a small part of what makes business and society run. It's much more complicated than that. And this stuff is actually harder. Like marketing is harder, I think, because it's like not easy to be like, this is right or wrong. Like I read a marketing book a couple of years ago. I think his name was Seth Godin or something like that. Yeah. And I remember he has this section in his book. He's going. He's like, we're doing this and you're doing that and everything's great. And he's like, and it doesn't work. And you don't know why.
Yep.
And I mean, he's like the god of marketing. So you're like, in engineering, you're like, we know exactly why it didn't work. The rocket blew up,
Yeah.
Or, the code failed.
It's very black and white.
Yeah. Like that should have been a semicolon and it was a period. And you know what I mean? And you're like, so it's a different type of field and it's still very relevant. But that's kind of where I think a lot of these tools really excel.
Yeah. So you could, especially if it's a smaller company, you could build profiles and ask chat to remember the profile about the president. And if you do anything and I've said this before, if you use any kind of psychological profile, like a Strengths Finder, or DISC, or any of these personality profiling things, you could. If they were willing to share that and you had it, you could build a profile for that person.
Oh yeah, what if you load that in there?
Yeah.
I've got one of those.
CRM supercharged.
I've got one. I'm going to throw that in there.
So now,
see what it does.
So now, when you want to send something to that person, it knows exactly what's going to resonate with them.
Yeah.
Now you could use it for evil and become the super manipulator, which is how I'll use it.
Yes.
Or you could just try to help your fellow person. But who wouldn't want to receive an email that speaks directly to them and what their needs are versus all the fluff and bullshit that you got to wade through is like asking questions back and forth because they're not understanding.
Yeah.
It could reduce the amount of back and forth with people because you're just getting it right the first time.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool use of it.
Well, I think it too is like, like as a consultant, I've done a lot of things where I know I can help someone and bring value to them, but how do I get their ear? And it's like knowing more about them or being able to have that angle is huge. You know what I mean? And just being able to say something silly, not actually silly, but like a cartoon example in their lives, and like, oh, that's interesting. Like, who is this? What is that? And it's like, let's talk, and being able to just coach and that kind of thing is great. Yeah.
And that's about 70% of my job.
Sure. Yeah.
Being in sales is,
Yeah.
I know I can solve your problems. I know what problem you have. How do I get in front of you to talk to you?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the name of the game. That's
Totally.
the hunt.
And my mind's spinning because there's one, like if you are working with people, they're probably going to share their DISC profile with you because they're like, oh yeah, I want to improve communication with you. But if you're selling to somebody outside the organization, now I'm thinking you could use AI to come up with a survey, essentially. I don't have a better word. There's got to be a better word for it. But I'm going to send this to you. You're going to answer all these questions. And then based off of their responses, now you can build this profile that you can then use when you're communicating with that person. Like, what kind of communication do you like? What's, all their likes and whatever they're willing to share with you is just going to make you better at interacting with them and helping them out.
Well, that's how YouTube does its advertising too, is all based on your, and we all complain about, the cookies and it learns all this stuff and now I get all these advertisements. And well, what's the flip side? You get the wrong advertisements.
Yeah.
I mean, someone told me that a long time ago. They said, don't ignore the cookies, don't ignore the preferences on there, set it up, because then you actually get stuff that's meaningful to you. And I thought, I never thought of it that way. I just thought, it's being intrusive, but for some reason I'm getting like dog food commercials right now, and I don't even own a dog. In fact, I'm allergic to dogs.
I bet you buy one in the next year.
That's interesting. Yeah. No, but to your point though, I mean, that I remember someone also presented an argument like that to me. It's like ads are good. They're actually, there's this whole thing of how they fund the internet, but that's like a different thing. But the idea of like, wouldn't you want to have things that could potentially help you in your life be presented to you?
Exactly.
And you'd be like, no, I'm not interested in that. And it's like, that's what like ad blockers and that kind of thing do, you know, but they can become overwhelming, but and then obviously a bad recommendation engine codes for giving you bad ones are bad. But at the same time, it's like, I've discovered a lot of really cool stuff on YouTube that like I didn't know existed,
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, we need to wrap this up.
Dang it.
Man,
I know. We're just getting cooking.
I know.
got real work to do today. Crap.
If you like what you heard today, join us and make some comments at the bottom and like and subscribe. Thanks, everybody.